It's mid-August, and the only thing hotter than a ghost pepper on a chili dog is the MLB American League playoff race. In this episode, we look at how things are shaping up and what trades were made in the final push. But first, our hard as diamonds trivia question. This is where Mad Dog Lance, aka Steve, tries to stump our expert Tyler. So far, Mad Dog is 0-4. Ouch. Steve, I came up with the new name just by watching you week in, week out get smoked by Tyler. And I thought, man, that dog is madder than a hornet in a mason's jar. What do you think of your new name, Steve?
Well, Ken, you've called me a lot worse, so I guess I should consider myself lucky.
All right. Let's see what you can do this week. Take your best shot at Tyler.
Okay. Well, as Ken mentioned so kindly, that Tyler is 4-0 on me, so let's see if I can get him this week. So, Tyler, this question this week is who done it? And what I'll do is I'll give you a sporting feat, and then you will have and give you two players, and you have to tell me which one did it.
Okay.
And so let me give you an example here. So, like, for instance, I will say they pitched a no-hitter on opening day. Was it Bob Feller or Nolan Ryan? And then this is just an example, but you would tell me.
Yeah, to which I would respond Bob Feller just for a little extra credit.
There you go. And so there's four of them. There's a football, there's a baseball, there's a basketball, and then there's a different sport. And I'll let you know the questions at the end, but I will be displaying a graphic for our viewers so that they can put their answers in the comment. What do you think? You up for it?
Perfect. I like it because you've gotten creative to try to stump me. We're going with a new question format, so I'll be interested to see how this plays out. And I'll also be interested to see what your wallet looks like, because I'm not sure how much you paid Christopher Mad Dog Russo to steal his nickname, but I'm sure that probably wasn't free, was it?
Yeah, we might have some copyright infringement going on there, huh?
I love it. All right. Welcome back to all of our faithful viewers, and a heartfelt welcome to our new viewers for episode number 5 of Sports Triad, which we recorded on August 12th, 2026. I'm Ken Lance, your humble host who's driving this train. Joining us are author, songwriter, retired computer geek, Steve Lance, aka Mad Dog, who is barely hanging on to the caboose. And, of course, the fastest man in radio, our award-winning sports broadcaster, Tyler Lance, who's the steam that keeps this thing chugging. Steve, break down the standings for us.
All right. Well, things have gotten interesting here. So, all right, guys, tell me, can you see the graphic I put up?
We've got it.
Okay, great. Well, so what we have here is, we have the Rays, the Sox, and the Astros in first place, and it's looking like the Rays are going to run away with their position, and the Sox are starting to look like they're opening up some distance. And the Astros, maybe they take it, maybe not. It could switch between them and the Rangers. So, but then the wild cards are open up, and I'm having the Yankees and Red Sox as very likely to be two of the three, and then you just have this group of teams. Any one of them could be the final, the spot number 6. Tyler, what do you think? Do you agree that it's pretty much the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Rays taking the division?
Yeah, at this point, I think if you've been watching the American League all year, clearly the 3 best teams are the Rays, Yankees, and Red Sox, which is honestly incredible to say because people were talking about the Red Sox being a seller just a couple months ago before that 14-game win streak, and then they're a buyer and a real World Series contender. But yeah, the Rays are starting to run away with the East. They still have a very easy remaining schedule. It would be stunning if they didn't finish as the number 1 seed. And then Yankees, Red Sox, kind of the same thing. I don't know what order they're going to finish in, but I would be highly confident they'll be the 1 and 2 wild card seeds. And after that, you're kind of down to who's winning the Central, who's winning the West, and then that final wild card spot. But yeah, Yankees, Red Sox, Rays, I would write it in pen on my playoff bracket.
You know, what could happen too is, you know, the Orioles and the Jays, you know, if you'd have asked me a week ago, I would have thought they were fading, but now they're right back in the race for it. So it could be the East has all 3 wild cards.
I would still be a little surprised if that happened, to be honest, because the thing to remember is the East still has to play each other. The Orioles and the Blue Jays will have to play the most games against the Yankees, Red Sox, and Rays. So that's going to matter a lot for the remaining strength of schedule. As far as getting back into the race, I'd more so frame it as maybe that mediocre middle has kind of let them stay in the race more than anything. But it's not impossible. I mean, you know, we thought it was impossible for the Red Sox a little while ago. If one of those teams rips off a 7 or 8 game win streak, all of a sudden we're having a different story. It's hard to imagine based on what we've seen so far, though.
Teams did some wheeling and dealing before the deadline, including our beloved Guardians, who picked up outfitter Joe Odell. Steve, what do you think about this?
Well, I wish you'd have asked once again. I wish you'd have asked me a week ago. Because a week ago, I would have been telling you, the Guardians did a great job, and that you know, they were preparing themselves for the run, but you know, right now they're kind of slumping, and so despite the trades, I'm starting to get a little concerned. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, look, the Guardians, they're playing bad, low-energy baseball right now. And I think that will change, although maybe the question is more about the trade deadline. So first I'll address that. I think the Guardians did what they needed to do at the trade deadline. I think the fear, if you're a Guardians fan, about going into the deadline would have been, well, the biggest issue of the Guardians this year is that the players you're relying on to be great haven't been great. Jose Ramirez, one of, if not the worst years of his career, plus the injury. Steven Kwan, very down year until the last few weeks. And then Kyle Manzardo has been one of the worst first basemen in the American League. And I think maybe the fear going into the deadline was the Guardians would say, well, at least 2 of those 3 are going to turn it around, and that's going to be our trade deadline acquisition, just those guys improving their performance. But I think the Guardians front office said, you know what? There's no guarantee about the 2027 season. The American League, frankly, stinks this year. This is as bad of an American League as I think I ever remember in my time as a baseball fan. Even just a few additions could kind of tip the scales a little bit. And, you know, if you get above 500, you might be a playoff team. I mean, it might take 83 or 84 wins to get into the playoffs, and not just do that, but be the number 2 seed, as crazy as that sounds, and get a first-round bye and go automatically to the division series. So from that standpoint, I like what the Guardians did at the deadline. You know, as far as Joe Adell goes, one of the biggest issues with this team is they don't hit enough home runs, and you need to hit home runs to win in October. Now, will Joe Adell do anything besides hit home runs? He's probably not going to contribute much else besides that, but I kind of like at least having one guy who, hey, he might go, you know, 1 for 10 over the course of a series, but that one's going to be a big one. So I was in favor of that trade. And then the fact that they got Nathaniel Lowe at first base and weren't afraid to send Kyle Manzardo to AAA instead of sticking to something that wasn't working, that was big too. You factor in that they added an all-star pitcher, Foster Griffin, to what was an already strong rotation. This was a good deadline by the Guardians. So now, after this long-winded reply, I think the biggest issue is not that the team doesn't have the talent to get this thing turned around. I think it's they've got to start playing cleaner baseball, less self-inflicted errors, less strange managerial decisions with the bullpen. And, you know, frankly, it's lining up the pitching and hitting at the same time, because since the Guardians have made these trades for Adell and Lowe, the offense has started to hit a little bit, but at the same time, the pitching's kind of taken a little slump over the last week. So I'm going to stick my neck out and say the Guardians, they'll get it together. They've usually been a good second half team. They made the right moves at the deadline. And, you know, it's not going to take 90 wins to get to the playoffs this year. It's going to take probably 84. And I think they can do that, but they better get it turned around soon. I mean, 1 or 2 more bad weeks like this, and I might be changing my tune.
Well, it it wouldn't be Cleveland baseball if we don't take it right down to the wire to see what we can do, right?
Exactly.
Do you want to talk about some of the other trades, Steve, and get Tyler's opinion?
Yeah, I definitely want to hit this Detroit trade because this is kind of originally, and I think this was Detroit's thought too, is that they weren't going to make the playoffs, and Scudell, is that how you say his name?
Skubal.
Oh, so close, Steve.
Skubal. He's going to be free agent, so let's get something for him. We'll not go. And then they go on this heater, and now they're right in it for at least the number six seed. Did Detroit mess up by pulling the trigger there? And then I want to follow up with a question about Detroit and the Guardians, but go ahead on the first one on that trade. What's your feeling there?
That's one of the most complex questions of the trade deadline, because you're right, the Tigers had gotten back into it, and not just for a wild card spot, but they might chase down the White Sox and win the division. That's still very much in play. And I think the problem with what the Tigers did is when you sell Tarek Skubal, and not just trade him, but trade your number 2 starter Casey Mize, that basically means you might get hot and still make the postseason. You're not going to win a World Series after trading that kind of pitching. Your cap is pretty much probably losing in the division series if you even get to the playoffs. So from that standpoint, Skubal's leaving in free agency. I think selling was fine. I don't think they got enough, and that's kind of been the common theme. And I think part of the pushback is they sent him to the Dodgers, and everyone's kind of tired of the Dodgers after the back-to-back World Series championships. But I think there were a couple of teams that could have given up more for Skubal who didn't. And I think if the Tigers had maybe held out until the final day of the deadline instead of trading Skubal a couple of days early, they maybe could have forced one of those teams to lay their cards down. And maybe I'll save this for later, but I think one of the teams that could have gotten Skubal that didn't is the trade deadline's biggest loser. But from the Tigers' standpoint, they're not going to win the World Series this year, and I'm not sure keeping Skubal would have changed that. But I think the disappointment is they got a good return, but I don't think they got the kind of return that is going to turn their franchise around and, bring in this new phase of rebuilding. And I think that's probably what leaves Tigers fans maybe a little disappointed after this deadline. They didn't fully commit to keeping Skubal, and they maybe could have squeezed a little more out of the teams that were bidding for him.
Yeah. And, I think this is one of the problems with baseball, is he's going to be a free agent, and, the big wallets are going to come in, and one of them is going to get him. So Detroit's almost in a position where they almost have to trade him. It's kind of like, what's odds that they'll actually be able to sign him, at the end of the season.
Right. Or you flip things around. If they did say, we're going to pony up and sign him, they would have to gut the rest of their team. I mean, if the kind of contracts he would command, it would be hard to imagine them paying much of anyone else. So you really are in a no-win situation if you're not one of those major markets.
Yeah, and of course the Dodgers end up getting him. So there we go. There we go with that. Want to ask you one more question about the Tigers. To me, looking at the schedule, they of course playing the Guardians. I'm now thinking about the Guardians play them tonight and tomorrow. They lost last night to them, and they have one more series against them. So they have 5 of their remaining 42 games against the Tigers. I think that's, if they're going to make the playoffs, I think they got to take at least 3 of those and probably 4 of those games. What's your thoughts?
That seems likely, and it's not just that. In early September, the Guardians play a weekend series in Minnesota. They still got the White Sox one more time. We're at the point now, you've got to start winning 2 out of 3, because it feels like the Guardians have been losing 2 out of 3 in just about every series they've played since the All-Star break and even slightly before. But I agree. You certainly can't afford to get swept in any of those series. I think you could survive 1 or 2 series where you lose 2 out of 3, but at this point, they've been treading water for so long, and even kind of taking on water maybe would be more accurate. That I think you're about right. You probably need to take 3 from the Tigers out of 5, and then you probably do need to get 2 out of 3 from the Twins and certainly the White Sox. You definitely need that from them with White Sox currently in first place.
And each of those games is almost like a double value because, I mean, if you lose them, not only are you losing a game, but you're giving one of the wild card contenders a game. So it's almost like double important.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, AL Central is just crazy at this point. I mean, you've got 4 teams within a stone's throw of first place, and potentially one of those teams may be sneaking into a wild card spot too, but just nothing is guaranteed as we approach the halfway point of August.
Just going to bring up Adele again, Tyler. Is he going to add a bunch of power for against the left-handed pitching?
Yeah, I think he is, and it kind of seems to be a trade deadline theme that goes back years and years. The Guardians are always saying we need to add a right-handed power bat, and they've added a right-handed power bat. It's kind of in the mold of a trade they made of San Diego, a few years ago when they acquired Franmil Reyes. Adele's a very similar kind of player, so he is going to add some power to the Guardians lineup, and especially too, I mean, your main power threat right now is Jose Ramirez, and his power is severely limited by that hamate surgery he had. Everyone says that when you have that surgery, when you come back, it still takes a while to get your power hitting back. So Jose might be more of a contact hitter for the rest of the season. We may not see his normal power, so I think that makes it even, frankly, more important that they got a guy like Adele who actually does have, a 30-plus home run season on his resume like he had last year.
Okay, Steve, how do you think all this is going to shake out?
Well, the way I see it is I think the Guardians are going to win the World Series, and that's something I've believed ever since Gaylord Perry and Buddy Bell played for them.
Oh my gosh! Wait a minute! Maybe I should have called you old dog, Lance, not Mad Dog.
Even though that's closer to the truth, I still stand by my original thing that I've been called worse. No, I mean, realistically, we're hoping the Guardians can grab that number 6 seed, which means on the way 3-game series. It's a long, tough road. I think it's the Blue Jays and the Dodgers this year, or not the Blue Jays, the Tampa Bay, the Rays.
Okay, I was gonna say you were really going out on a limb of that one.
Yeah,
he put it all on the Blue Jays, Tyler.
Take it to Vegas right now.
Let me share this screen. I'm going to share the screen again, and these are the trades, and I just want to get Tyler's opinion on who's the winners and who the losers are. What do you think? Originally, this graphic, it was the Sox, the Guardians, and Boston as the winners, and then the other teams seemed like they were cashing in and getting what they could before players left them.
Yeah, and I do like that you added the Guardians as the top tier contender down there for the odds. I think that's a nice touch. But I'm glad you put up this graphic, actually, because I think as much as we've talked about the Tarek Skubal trade and as much as that one's grabbed the national attention, to me, the trade that made this deadline the most stunning and one of the craziest deadlines we've had in years is the interdivision Adley Rutschman trade, where Baltimore sends their former number 1 overall pick catcher to the Boston Red Sox. And I'm going to be lame here and say that trade was a win for both teams, because if you're Baltimore, you got back 3 prospects who are immediately top 10 prospects in your organization. Like, that is a real big time return for that trade. And I think the Red Sox probably had to pay the inside the division tax and pay up a little more to get Rutschman. And then I think it's a win for Boston too, just because I'm usually going to give the buying team, the team that's trading for the established player, the benefit of the doubt. I am rarely, if ever, going to fault a front office for going for it, even if they overpaid, because, you look at prospects, there's so much projection, there's so much unknown, and you just don't know how those guys are going to pan out in 3 or 4 years. So I still think, like, with the Red Sox getting back into it, you've got to capitalize on this momentum, and they did that by trading for Rutschman. But, again, not to derail us too far, but part of the reason I think this trade is so fascinating for a million reasons is you look back at what Baltimore did just a few years ago. I've got their season by season record pulled up, and they kind of did the baseball equivalent of the tanking that happens in the NBA more commonly. 2018, Baltimore loses 115 games. 2019, they lose 108 games. 2020 was a shortened season, but they went 25 and 35, which for a full year, that's 90 plus losses. And then 2021, they lose 110 games. So basically, you have a 4-year stretch where not only are you bad, you're historically bad each and every year. And they basically did that to get high draft picks and kind of turn their franchise around. And it's kind of interesting that this trade happened now because it's essentially the Orioles saying, we tried with this group and now it's time to retool. Yes, a lot of the guys that they drafted during that time are still on the roster, but Rushman, that was like the big superstar who's going to be the centerpiece of your organization for years to come, and they just traded him away. And I think this goes back to my point about you never know if prospects are going to work out. I'm going to run down a list of names here the Orioles drafted following that the tank fest they had for a few years. Jackson.
Well,
Yeah, Heston Kierstead, he was a first-round pick. Colton Cowser, he was a first-round pick as well. So, like, guys that they drafted in the top 5 of the draft, and those guys they just ran off, they're on the Orioles now, and they're solid players, but they haven't become the superstars you would think they'd be by being top 5 picks. And the Orioles, after all this tanking, after a historic level of losing, one of the worst 4-year stretches in the history of Major League Baseball, they come away with 2 playoff appearances where they were swept both times. They got swept in the division series by the Rangers in 2023 and swept in the wild round by the Royals in 2024. So I think it's super interesting from that standpoint. And I think it makes you question their GM a little bit in his roster construction. And, you know, he had these years of high draft picks, and that was supposed to get Baltimore to the World Series or close to it. And they never got past the divisional round. So to me, that, as long as I've rambled on here, that was by far the most fascinating trade that I've seen in years.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about something I think you alluded to. The team that did not do what they needed to do. Were you alluding to the Yankees?
Well, I'd kind of put the Yankees in the middle of the pack. I do think they really needed a catcher, and they didn't get one. But, you know, the Elliot Ramos trade and Luis Garcia trade, like, those are fine trades. And I think if everyone gets healthy by the postseason, the Yankees could be a real threat. That being said, I don't think you're going to get everyone healthy by the postseason just because of the age and injury history of their players. I'd put the Yankees kind of in the middle of the pack. I don't think they're a big winner or a big loser from this deadline. You know what I will say is the big loser, though, and this is what I alluded to earlier. Frankly, shame on the Milwaukee Brewers for not going to get Tarek Skubal. That they are one of, if not the biggest losers of this deadline. Brewers right now have the number 1 seed. They're on track to get home field advantage just like they did last year in the playoffs. And as we know, it didn't matter last year. They got swept in 4 games in the championship series by the Dodgers. This year, they had a chance to change all of that. Frankly, they have higher rated prospects than the Dodgers in some cases. And the Brewers' number 1 and number 2 overall rated prospect are both under 20 years old. So, you know, a lot of expectations, but also it's going to be a while before those guys are superstars in the big leagues, if they even become that. And the fact that Milwaukee wasn't willing to trade even one of those guys for Skubal, and they got beat out by the Dodgers, who had less prospect ammo, it's frankly a shame for Milwaukee, because if you put Tarek Skubal with Jacob Mizorowski, Milwaukee's current ace, that's a 1-2 punch that's very rarely been seen in Major League history. That's like the early 2000s Diamondbacks of Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson that they rode to a World Series title. I think the Milwaukee Brewers just played it safe at the deadline, and they had a chance to take a big risk and go for it all, and they didn't. And with the position they're in, that's a shame, because the Dodgers got a lot better, and the Brewers kind of stayed the same when they had a chance to really take advantage. You know, they added a relief pitcher, Antonio Senzatella. That was fine, but They could have used Skubal and they could have used another bat, and instead they're going to clutch on to prospects who we really will only know what they are in 4 or 5 years from now. So the Brewers were one of my big losers of the deadline.
Yeah, if you're a mid-market, small market team and you have a shot, you got to take it. I mean, that's, when you don't have a shot, you rebuild, but when you've got the shot, you just got to go all in.
Yes. And you know what? Even a bigger market team, too. This is going to bring me to another loser. The other division-leading team right now in the National Braves, they're a big loser as well in this deadline. You look at the National League standings, and you hear me talk all the time. which teams are getting the bye. Right now, the Brewers are a few games ahead of the Braves and the Dodgers for the bye. And I think we can pretty much agree, looking at the standings, that those three teams are pretty locked in as division winners, right? Brewers, Dodgers, Braves. It's a race for that number 2 seed. And that is important because that's not having to play in the wild card series. And the Braves and the Dodgers right now have the same record. And the Braves essentially sat around and also did nothing. They have so many injuries to their starting pitching right now. They could have used Skubal as well, but even a second-tier starting pitcher, like on that graphic he showed a little while ago, the White Sox traded for Luis Castillo. That's a guy the Braves should have been going after. And, they got a couple pitchers at the deadline, but they some lower-tier pitchers compared to, I think, what they could have gotten. So the Braves, even though they have a good lineup, they hit a lot of home runs. That's typically does well in the postseason. They did not address pitching the way they needed it to. And I think both the Brewers and the Braves kind of just left the door wide open for the Dodgers to reestablish themselves as the favorites in the National League, even though the Dodgers have been playing some pretty poor baseball the past couple of weeks themselves. I mean, their lineup is aging. They have the oldest roster in baseball. The Kyle Tucker signing this offseason has been a disaster so far. So as much as people think the Dodgers are invincible, they're not. And I think this deadline, the Braves and the Brewers acted like the Dodgers were invincible, and those two teams were just competing for second, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't know if it was last episode or a couple episodes ago where I was saying that the Dodgers were almost for sure to make the World Series. And, I'm doubting that now. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I mean, Ohtani hasn't pitched in a couple of weeks. Like Mookie Betts looks entirely washed up right now. And I think part of the draw of the Dodgers to people is they have so many names that people have heard of, but some of those names are starting to get on the downside of their career. And, when this dynasty run comes to an end for the Dodgers, it'll look like a lot like it looks right now, with older players starting to age out of their productive years. And I'm not saying it's over yet for the Dodgers. I think after the Skubal trade, they've got to be considered the favorite in the National League just because their starting rotation basically has 4 all-stars if Shohei Ohtani comes back healthy for the playoffs. But I think they are more vulnerable than people think they are, and the rest of the National League didn't act like it. Some of the other teams that maybe could have knocked them off sat on their hands. And then, the teams that did do something in the trade deadline, the Padres are a good example. They traded for a couple starting pitchers of Casey Mize and Robbie Ray. The Diamondbacks added a bat. Those teams are going to be wild card teams. And, those wild card rounds are just such a toss-up. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. An interesting thing I noticed too was, they back to the American League. It looks like, with the East, New York and Boston getting the 2 and 3 seed. So, and then Tampa, winning the division. All 3 of those teams are going to have to settle it out before they go to the championship series. So only one of them can make it. Instead, you won't have Yankees versus Tampa for the league championship. Just the way it's coming down.
That's a good point. And again, that's why I think some of the biggest winners of this trade deadline are in the American League. Like I like what Tampa did. Like they fortified their team to make sure they secure that division title and that number 1 seed, and that they wouldn't have to face the Yankees or Red Sox potentially in the American League Championship Series. And yeah, like I'm thinking about the way the playoffs line up right now. So let's just say the season ended today. That would mean, so if the season ended today and we were beginning the playoffs, the Yankees would play the Red Sox in the wild card round, and then the number 2 seeded division winner, which they'd have a bye. The number 3 seeded division winner, let's just say that would be the West team. So that'd be Houston. They would play the final wild card team, which could be anyone. We kind of showed that graphic where it's 7 different teams fighting for that last spot. So you're right. Like the Yankees and Red Sox, like there's a good chance they're going to pick each other off, end up in that 1 and 2 wild card spot. And one of them is going to pick the other one off before they even see the Rays.
Yeah, and then the next game will be the Rays, because Rays will be the number 1 seed, so they'll play whoever the 4th and the 5th. They'll play whoever the winner of the Yankees and the Red Sox. Because the numbers, yeah,
and the Rays will have home field advantage for it, assuming they hold on to this division lead, where they've won. I think they're 41-19 or something like that at home, but by far the best home record in baseball.
All right, that's a lot to think about. Now it's time for the Hard as Diamonds trivia answer. Roll it back, Steve.
All right, I'm going to once again use the screen sharing, and I'll bring this up, and then we'll make sure I show the one that doesn't have the answers. All right, so Tyler, to get credit, you have to get 3 out of 4 of these. And so the first one is, who done it? Hit 4 home runs in a single game. Was it Lou Gehrig or Babe Ruth?
All right, we're going to start off strong here and say it was Lou Gehrig to hit 4 home runs in a game.
You are correct. Okay, number 2. This was the NFL first overall NFL draft pick. Was it Terry Bradshaw or Roger Staubach?
All right. Well, we'll see if this ends up being wrong later. This is the one I'm least confident in of the 4, but I believe it was Roger Staubach. Oh, it was
Terry
Bradshaw.
Bradshaw. Interesting thing about Roger Staubach. He won the Heisman Trophy, but he was picked rather late because he went to school at the Naval Academy and had to do his military service first. So he went rather late. He did his 4 years of military service, including going to Vietnam, and then replaced Don Meredith for the Cowboys when he came back after 4 years.
You know, I'm just trying to build a little drama for those last 2 questions to see if we can get 3 out of 4. I'm trying to force myself to have to hit a buzzer beater here to get them.
You got to get both of these, or you'll no longer be no longer have a perfect score. All right, number 3, we move to the NBA. 80-plus points. Only 3 players have done it. Was one of them Kobe Bryant, or was it LeBron James?
All right, this one was Kobe Bryant.
Too easy, huh? Yeah, LeBron's highest score was 61. And now the final one. We go to golf. So who has the most Masters wins? Is it Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods?
All right, this is the other one that could potentially trip me up because my trivia knowledge of golf is not quite as deep as it is with baseball, for example, but I'm pretty sure this one is Jack Nicklaus for the 3 out of 4.
Darn! Oh, he got skunked again.
You are right. Jack had 6, Tiger had 5.
You made me sweat that one out a little bit, I will say, but yes, I had to maintain my reputation, my perfect streak so far for beating the challenges.
Okay, well, I have a bonus question for you to try to trip you up on this one. So this is, who is the only Major League Baseball player to hit 3 home runs in both leagues? 3 in a single game. 3 home runs in a single game in both leagues. Only one player in the history of baseball has done that.
Oh, this is a good one. All right, there's one name that my mind immediately goes to, but I'm just mentally running through the options here before I just vomit out an answer here onto the into the ether. All right. This is definitely more of an educated guess than me knowing it for sure, but I'm going to make my educated guess and say it was Frank Robinson.
Nope.
Ah.
Babe Ruth. He had three home runs in a single game with the Yankees, and then at the very end of his
Boston
career,
Braves. Like the last gasp of his career. Yes. Man, that's a tricky one. That was a good one.
Yeah, but you got the main one, so you're now 5-0, and I'm just gonna have to come up with a really tough one next time.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. See you next time on Sports Triad.